So about 2010, I would hear on the television media's view of people who were religious and their view of religion and their view of God. And I had a sense that it was very different from what the common person like myself, their view of God. So I thought to myself, wouldn't it be cool if I could get 100 people to just tell us a God story? The human spirit is edified by story, and so just hear story instead of theory. And that might get us to understand what is actually going on. So in 2010, I was walking from St. Paul of the Cross Church on a Saturday morning with a prospective presenter over to Panera. And it was a cold, wintry day. The winds were blowing, and it was not pleasant outside. Well, about 2 months before that, I had been lecturing at Mass, and you're supposed to make eye contact with everybody in the audience. And I noticed this one person who, by her demeanor, I thought to myself, wow, that person is really devoted. I didn't know who she was. But then I made it my business to ask her if she would present in the seminar series, and I was astounded when she said, absolutely not, because I said, why? She said, well, I'm just an accountant. What would you want with an accountant? And I meekly said, I tried to do as good as I can, did as good as I could. But as a result of that, though, we did start a little relationship. And about maybe 2 weeks later, she told me after Mass that there was a healing service going on at a particular church, and asked me, why don't you go? So I invited Marianne, my wife, and she invited Jackie, her friend, and we went. And the lady presenter, she went on her own, so it wasn't like, we're just kind of like getting to know each other a bit. So we go up before the healing priest, and he lays his hands on Marianne. She goes down. And Jackie and I are like, holy cow, nothing happened to us. And we're off on the side looking at her. It took a long time for her to get up. So after an experience like that, that broke the ice more with this lady too. And then about 2 weeks later, I could see what a truly spiritual person she was. And I asked her if she would meet with me, and she said that she would. So on our way over to Panera, she started to tell me her story, and as she told it to me, tears were streaming down my face. And by the time we got to Panera, neither one of us would go inside, even though the wind is blowing and it's freezing cold, because what she was saying was so significant. And I had a distinct feeling that she had never told her story, her spiritual story, to another person. And more than that, nobody had ever asked her. And she did end up presenting in the seminar series, and her talk is A Rose for Gaspa. Gaspa is Croatian for the Blessed Mother. And some people have we corresponded back and forth by email as it came closer for her time to present. And she sent me an email and she said, I'm afraid to present, but I am not going to let my fear keep me from talking about my God. I have an awesome God, and I want to talk about him. And she went on from there to get a master's degree in theology, and at this day and time, she is teaching grade school theology. So here's a person. You have a stopgap. One of the things that I find is that some people have a stopgap. It's like a fuse or a circuit breaker, that if they cross this boundary and talk about this spiritual matter, it would feel like it'd be blowing a fuse. And she had overcome that, and but I had another presenter who we met, but he never did present in the seminar series. But I learned as much from him as those who do. And he started out our conversation by saying, before God, I am an honest man. And I thought about that. And I thought how real that was, because he was integrating his spiritual life with his everyday life, and he was drawing God into the conversation. And those words stuck with me. And from time to time, I'll use those words myself on an important occasion. The presenters in the seminar series have given me sticky information. There has not been a presenter that I didn't get sticky information from. I remember the first presenter that I got who told me, he presented in the seminar series, but he had just recently retired. And he told me that in his retirement, he would do two things every day. He would witness beauty, like a sunset or a beautiful tree, take it in, and he would give candy to someone. And by candy, he meant that he would do something that they would appreciate that he was doing. So every person gave me sticky information. And every person, I found this out, that every person has a story. There is no person who does not have a story. On my own, I would talk to people, and I have spoken to agnostics and atheists, and you have to phrase the question the right way. I said, do you believe in a caring presence outside of yourself? Oh yes, they do. So, and then they would tell you a story about something that serendipitous happened that they can't explain. So again, the human spirit is craving to come to God, and it's universal. The tears that I told you about that I had when I was talking to the presenter about when she was telling me her story about Gaspa. What I do is I use a protocol. It took me a while to figure out how to get the story out of a person. So what I ended up doing was I say, do you find in your workaday experience that from time to time you provide extreme value? And then they would say yes, and then I'd ask them to tell me a concrete example, and then that would become their story. So the seminar series is about stories. In about half of the cases, when they would tell me their story, I would be moved to tears because I would say, did you feel a sense of humility at the same time that you provided extreme value? And they would say, yes. And I would say, well, I submit to you that when we're in the presence of God, we feel small. And it's a gift that God gives us that we might know that we are not alone. Because even under the best of circumstances, you could never accomplish all that was accomplished. And so another common theme that I find is a palpable compassion. And the sacramental life leads to compassion for others. And more than any other characteristic through these talks, caring for others is something that comes about. I had one man who taught a quality control class in his factory, and he made the invitation open for education to anybody in the factory. And one day he came into the room where they were doing the training, and on the bulletin board it said, "I am somebody." So his compassion for these people, he started to view people in a different way. Tragedies. Every parish has a tragedy, has more than one tragedy, whether it's the sudden death of a spouse in a young, loving family, the unexpected death of a child, a tragic illness striking an innocent person. And these are things that happen in every parish. But what was unusual was that they would talk about the outcome of their tragedy unsolicited. So, for example, one time I was talking to a man, and he was going to be talking about a particular matter, and he said, "Jeff," he said, "I want to talk about the loss of my wife. I want to talk about what that meant to me." And he was a police officer whose job was to bring the news of sudden death to people right here in Park Ridge. And in his story that he presented to the audience, it was his wife who had died. And he said, "You do not know what it is like to do that job until you get the knock on the door yourself." But the thing was that the resolution that Christ was in his life, and that through the tragedy it was a watershed moment. So the local meaning of suffering was poignant because the true meaning of Christ's life was in his life too. And since then, many relevant resolution stories have come forth on their own, and the sequel resolution stories, they just came about. So it's curious to see that how through tragedy, the answer of the meaning of suffering comes out in a productive way. Direction. I had a friend who was running videos in California doing the same program. And he said, "Jeff, okay, we're getting these videos, but what do we do after the people present?" And we knew that it was taking us someplace, but we didn't know where. And after I had 100 videos, I've had 140 presenters so far, and after about the 100th one, I did find the answer. And the answer was a Work Meets Faith small group. So this small group continues on, and it meets only 9 times a year for 2 hours. And we use what we call relevant resolution storytelling. So someone will share a concern about their handling of some God thing, and then the others in the group will tell stories, if they have one, related to that same topic. So I set out to uncover the true meaning of God in the lives of ordinary people like you and I found the preciousness of God at work in the lives of these people. I have 2 handouts tonight. One is we're going to have next in February 24th, a Saturday at the beginning of Lent, there will be an assembly for people to try out a Work Meets Faith small group. And if you like this, I think you'll like to try this small group idea out too. It's on a Saturday. It runs from 10 a.m. to noon time, and that's one of the handouts. And the other one is that I typed up, there's more things that I've learned from doing this seminar series, but I don't want to go into all of it. So thank you. Does anybody have any questions? Yes, Cecilia.
I'd actually like to ask this question of all 3 of our presenters. I'm wondering if your individual faith journeys have had an impact on your family as well, your children or your spouses.
Barb?
Well, I have to say, yeah, when I talk about, feeling that peace and everything else, one of my sons is here. It's a big deal in a family going through that, and yes, it gets you closer, and you really prioritize the things that are most important. So, yes, for us it was as a family, absolutely.
How about you, Jeff?
I also had breast cancer.
Yeah. There's a few of us here, actually.
How about you, Jeff?
I'm single, and I have a small family. I have my brother and my 2 nephews that I adore, Justin and Stephen. And they're crazy teenagers right now. They're 17, seniors in high school. And I have been trying to find a way that I can relate to them with referring to things of God, because they've changed from when I used to talk to them. And it's kind of difficult for me to do that, but I pray that I can reach them, because I would like to see them get more involved in the church. they've never really been churchgoers in my brother's family. My brother and I were raised Catholic. We went to Catholic elementary school in St. Zachary's in Des Plaines. And my brother got turned off by something that happened in the church, and he never really went back. And basically, kind of the same thing happened with me. And I wanted to come back because I felt that it was going to be the best thing I could do to save my soul.
My answer would be that the seminar series has profoundly changed my life, and to the degree that I have changed and changed for the better, then it may impact my family. But there's nothing direct or overt that I can point to that said, you know, here's the change. Any other questions? Thanks.
How did you come up with the idea, the concept?
I was in church, and I was hearing the gospel, and I had this prompting inside myself, like, holy cow, did you hear what just happened there? You know, where Christ is, they're trying to nail him right and left, and he's got an answer, and it's like, I wanted to talk to somebody, and that prompting was a precursor of this desire to find out what really is the case. My initial efforts didn't work. The first person I talked to, I said, hey, would you like to have coffee after Mass? And he thought I was selling him something. My second effort came kind of through the men's club. That guy back there, John Nesbitt, he roped me into a men's club meeting. Anyway, in any event, we got the seminar series possibly going, and his response to the board of directors of the men's club was, I'd never present, but I'd go to all of the presentations. But he did present, and he does come to all the presentations. Any other questions? Well, I'm mostly grateful to everybody here for making this seminar series what it is. And if you know of a person who would make a good presenter, or if you yourself feel like you would like to present, please send an email to Maureen. Maureen has done an amazing job at, there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes we end up with these videos at Liautaud TV, and you can see these 100 stories. If you want to know the stories that I cried about, there's a faith enrichment category that's called Presence of God. And I thought, that would be more palpable, the real presence of God. Those that hit that, and all the ones that are like that will come up. But in any event, Maureen has done a terrific job at learning these steps. But she is not a salesperson. And so she said, you feed me names. And she knows how to interview the people and does a great job. But at this point, I feel like God is calling me not to do this. God is calling me to have others do this. And isn't this what we're called to do anyway? So I'm depending upon you. We're going through a transition here. Anything else? Well, thank you.
Thank you so much for